Hey, what's up, guys? I had a couple minutes here to do a quick impromptu video. Just wanted to talk about the amazing performance yesterday from Inoue, who scores a dominant, absolutely dominant eighth round destructive stoppage of the previously undefeated Stephen Fulton to claim his two unified junior featherweight titles yesterday in Tokyo. What a performance from Naoya Inoue. Um, and look, I have to own where I was wrong. I mean, my pick was Inoue, but I thought it'd go to the cards. I really, really did. And more than that, I actually thought Fulton would win some early rounds. You guys, if you watched the neutral corner Monday where I did my prediction, I thought that Fulton would be able to smother Inoue a little bit, get close to him, smother him, kind of move him around, wrestle with him a little bit, use a little bit of that Philly fighting style to give Inoue something to think about early on. I expected Inoue to make the adjustments, and I expected his power, explosiveness, and all that to break through in the middle rounds. And then I thought he'd take over in the second half of the fight. That didn't happen. Inoue took over 30 seconds into the fight. And really what it was, right away early on was that stab to the body. So I want to talk about that for a second because a lot of fighters love to jab to the body. Okay. When you got a guy who's got a high guard and he's expecting the jab up top, it's really easy to feint and slip under and get that jab to the body. It's one of the easier kind of feints to use in all of boxing. It's much more difficult to feint low and come up high. It's much more difficult. But anyway, a lot of guys that throw that stab to the body, and this includes most professional fighters actually, they crowd themselves when they do it. They get too close. They don't get the proper length on that punch, and they don't have the right angle because it's really, really easy if you don't do it the right way. If you don't not only change levels, what I mean by changing levels is your head's up here and then it's here, right? You're changing levels, but also you have to get your head off the line. If you drop straight down, you're opening yourself up to a potential left hook counter or something like that, or maybe even a sharp right hand counter. You have to get your head down and off the line. So it's boom, right? That's the move. And you have to do that from the proper length, the proper distance to ensure that you can get the punch off. You step forward with that lead foot, but then you can bounce back and get your weight back on the rear foot. And Inoue did that beautifully, beautifully. Fulton, as the taller, longer fighter, could not counter that stick to the body. He couldn't do it. He wanted to, and you could see that he knew, okay, that's what he's coming with. Let me try to time this. Let me try to counter it. Let me try to move and do what I got to do. He couldn't. He couldn't because Inoue threw it so textbook, so perfectly, and he placed the punches. They always landed in the solar plex, just perfectly. It was that punch that ultimately, of course, set up the knockout in the eighth round. If you guys saw, you've all seen the replays of the knockout sequence. It was a stab to the body with the left, and then up top with the right hand, followed up with a left hook. And that was it. The fight was over at that point. I give Fulton credit for getting up and trying to fight through it, but he was done. Fight could have been stopped right there. The ref, to his credit, gave Fulton a chance. And then Fulton ended up in the corner and ultimately with his butt down on the canvas after a barrage of punches from Inoue. And that was it. So looking at the CompuBox, and I'm not going to repeat all the numbers. I know some of you can't stand it, but I do have to mention this because, again, for the 5 billionth time, punch stats do give you an indication as to the action that took place in a fight. Okay, don't pay attention to the details of it, but just the trends inside those punch numbers. I'm just looking here at my screen off to the side. I've got the punch numbers pulled up. And Inoue threw and landed more in every single round. And he was actually more accurate in 6 of the 8 rounds. And not just more accurate, but significantly more accurate. Okay. Fulton landed 13% of his punches in the first round. Inoue landed 39%. So he tripled up the accuracy while throwing and landing more. That was from the first round. And that just set the tone. And 2-3 rounds into this, you're like, man, unless Fulton makes a serious adjustment, this fight is done. And I tweeted that a few in the early rounds. I was tweeting live while watching this. And I was saying, Fulton is getting his ass tapped right now. He's being completely outmatched in every single facet of boxing. This isn't just a little guy being quicker or a power puncher using power to break through. And that's where, again, I admit I was wrong. I underestimated Naoya Inoue. I didn't underestimate his athleticism, his power, all that stuff. What I underestimated was his ring IQ. He had a better game plan. He was able to see things a full step ahead of what Fulton saw. He was just better in every single aspect of fighting, of prize fighting on this particular night. He absolutely not only beat Fulton, but outclassed him. And let's put this into perspective. Inoue started at 108 pounds. Now, I get it. It was 8-9 years ago. I get it. He was a very young man, but you have to put this into perspective, okay? He is now fighting 5 divisions north of where he started. So he jumped 4 divisions, if you will. And in his first fight at 122, they didn't go and do a tune-up. They didn't, let's test the waters. Let's test the pay-per-view market. Let's do this. No, none of that bullshit. None of that 21st century American boxer Steven Espinoza bullshit. I'm just going to call it out. It is what it is. They said, let's go for the number one guy. Let's go for the number one guy and establish our dominance in yet another division. This was after being undisputed at 118 at bantamweight. So you get undisputed in your, 4th division? I think 3rd, because I think they skipped 115. So 3rd division, and then you move up to your 4th division and dominate and destroy the top guy. And to be clear, I do think that some of the mind games Fulton's team, I won't say Fulton, although Fulton did say some dumb shit, but I give fighters a pass in the lead up to a fight because you're just trying to motivate yourself, and I give him a complete pass. But his team used some tactics to try to get in Inoue's head. I think it really, really came back to haunt them. I think it motivated Inoue and made him even nastier than he already is. He's got a nasty, mean streak in him, the way he fights, but he was super nasty in this fight. He actually talked some shit to Fulton and motioned to him a couple times, like kind of showboating almost. And I've never really seen that from him. So he was definitely pissed off. And Fulton and his team, Fulton's team did him no favors in the way that they handled things during fight week. They really did him 0 favors. It sucks because, and by the way, Fulton's a lot, not all, but a significant portion of Fulton's fans did him a major disservice with all the stuff that they were saying online. We'll talk about some of that in a minute. But because Fulton's ultimately the fall guy, when you set things up that way, when you tip the scale so far like that, you've got to come out and at least be competitive. And Fulton wasn't. He got absolutely destroyed in this fight and stopped. And now it's like this guy that you all have been discrediting and saying was a hype job and being racial about it. I'm just going to call that out. There was a racial element to this. A xenophobic element. At best, it was just mild xenophobia, but at worst, it was just flat out freaking racism. And we all saw that. Come on, guys. And we see it all the time from a particular segment of fight fans, particularly in the United States. It exists in all corners of the universe, in all demos and everything. But there is a significant portion of it in the American boxing community. And unfortunately, it's tied to one particular platform, which represents the most American fighters. They have inroads in that platform because the people that run that platform have certain political leanings that kind of coincide with a lot of these crazy YouTube channels and stuff. And also that includes the network that platform fights on, but also certain boxing writer organizations and things like that here in the United States. Like these guys, these whack jobs have inroads into those institutions, those old school American boxing community institutions. And so even though they're a small minority of fans, they have a very, very, very loud microphone that they yell into, right? They preach from their pulpit and they're given a platform on certain platforms. So when they say the things that they say, it gets amplified. And they also do it every single time. Every single time. And it seems to increase more and more and more because, again, these guys are given platforms. These guys are credentialed. They're brought into fights. They're given access to fighters, particularly at a certain platform. And you guys can guess where I'm going with that. And again, I should mention it exists in all corners of the universe, and there are inroads to every single platform. Just here in the United States, it seems to go in one particular direction. Anyway, all that nastiness just led to maybe it helped hype the fight a little bit. I don't know. I don't think it needed any additional help. Inoue is a superstar in Japan, and he could fight anybody. He could fight me in Japan, and it would do massive numbers, right? Everyone would be like, who the hell is this guy who's fighting? Oh, whatever, it's Inoue. I'm going to watch it. He's got that status over there. He's a superstar. Several friends of the show were over there in Japan this week and posting pictures and videos of Inoue's face and image just everywhere, all over the place in Tokyo. So he's a superstar over there, and they didn't need any help selling this fight. So I don't buy into that notion either. I've heard a few people trying to say, oh, they're just trying to sell the fight. Really? It's not even in America. It's not on pay-per-view here. That makes no sense. So Inoue, look, I tweeted about this. Inoue is clearly the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world, okay? And I also said it doesn't really matter what happens Saturday. I still think Inoue is the top guy. And that pissed some people off, and they took liberties with that, of course, like they always do, and tried to find elements that weren't even a part of my message. Here's why I say that, okay? What Inoue just did, and again, you have to understand, this is a 4-division jump from where he started. He was undisputed at 118, and then in his first fight in a new division, he fights the top guy, the consensus top guy, rated #1 by The Ring, by ESPN, but like every reputable platform. I shouldn't mention ESPN among reputable platforms, but Fulton was seen as the top guy in the division. Okay, unified title holder, had 2 of the belts. And Inoue jumps right to him, beats him, and does it with superior craft. He doesn't just blitz him out of there with power. He did it with better craft, better ring IQ, better technique, all of it, better angle, spacing. He was the better athlete. He was the more dominant athlete in the fight. All of it. It's obviously Inoue would be a favorite against anybody at 122 right now. I do think Akhmadiev could perhaps give him some difficulties that Fulton couldn't. Just because of styles, okay? Just because of styles. But obviously I favor Inoue big time in that fight. And there are some other guys in there that could give him some interesting fights that would be competitive. Inoue's the top guy now in another division. And by this time last year, he was the top guy in the previous division. So to do that so quickly within a year, okay? Crawford and Spence. Spence has fought his entire career at welterweight. And there's nothing wrong with that. Plenty of other fighters have done that. Marvin Hagler, Gennady Golovkin for a recent example, although he just finally moved up to cash out against Canelo. But there have been plenty of guys who have stayed at one division and just cleaned it out and owned it. Spence has done that to a certain degree, but he hasn't fought the #1 challenger for the last 5 years. He hasn't. He's fought guys that in controlled in-house situations where he was going to win the fight. And he didn't even fight all those guys, because did he ever fight Keith Thurman? No. So there's a few guys in the PBC university. I guess Keith Thurman was the only major one. And a lot of that's on Keith. But he hasn't fought the top guy. The top guy is Crawford. Crawford has been the top challenger since he moved up in 2018. He's been seen as the top challenger to Spence. These two have been seen as the top 2 welterweights now for the last 3, 4, 5 years. And that is the complete opposite from what Inoue just did, moving up to 122 and fighting the top guy in his first fight in that division. That is the exact opposite of what Spence in the PBC, Espinoza, all those guys have done by trying to wait out and age out Terrence Crawford and get the most controlled situation that they can. Now they're putting it in Vegas. They got Crawford signed to a deal. They've got their judges and their ring officials in there to make sure that things are lined up the way they want it, instead of having to work with Top Rank where it'd be 50-50. And now you have to worry more about the judging and the officiating and things like that. Now you're controlling all that, which they are. And so their house guy has certain built-in advantages. That's just the way boxing works, particularly in Vegas. I'm not trying to spin a conspiracy theory or say the fix is in, but you guys know where I'm going with all this. It's lined up and it's a controlled situation now for Spence and his management. So if Spence wins this fight, even if he were to dominate and stop Terrence Crawford, let's say he knocks Crawford out in the 10th round, I still don't think in a pound for pound sense that is the equivalent of what Inoue has done. He would by far, obviously be the undisputed welterweight champion, to be the top welterweight in the world. He would be among the top pound for pound fighters in the world just because of his dominance over a single division. But he would have accomplished, Spence, what Inoue did last year at 118. Inoue cleaned out 118 in a couple years. It's taken Spence over a decade. He went pro, 2012? It's taken him over a decade to clean out a division. Inoue cleaned out the third division he fought in within a year or so. And then he moved up and took out the top dude. So if Spence wins, I don't care if he destroys Crawford in 2 rounds. It's not the equivalent in a pound for pound sense of what Inoue has done. Now, if Crawford wins, especially if he wins in dominant fashion, if he Inoue's Errol Spence, the conversation does get interesting. And now we'll have a debate to have, because Crawford started at 135. He was undisputed at 140. He has wanted the Errol Spence fight, but he was ducked by that entire platform, the entire American boxing establishment on that side of it, basically ducked and avoided him for a few years. So that's not his fault. So if he were to beat and dominate Spence, okay, now we have an interesting discussion here, because Crawford has done that pound for pound kind of work. He's cleaned out a previous division. He will now have been undisputed at 2 different weight classes. So now we're having an interesting discussion, and I'd be willing to entertain perhaps Crawford is pound for pound number 1. Okay. So we'll see what happens. But at this point, if you don't rate Naoya Inoue pound for pound number 1, you're just a dummy. You're an absolute dummy, and you're just exposing, again, at best, an ignorance of the lower weight divisions and non-American fighters in general. At worst, something kind of nasty, whether it be xenophobia, prejudice, flat-out racism. And there are both sides of that spectrum are being fed on boxing Twitter this week, okay? I'm seeing just absolute idiocy from people exposing their ignorance. And then I'm seeing that dark side where people are just going to a really nasty place. And it's unfortunate, but that's the world that we're living in. Let me just state for the record, 95% of boxing fans of every racial group, every ethnic nationality, all of it, just like boxing and just love boxing and love fighters of all backgrounds and are cool with everybody, right? If you're watching and listening to my show, you're one of those people, because we don't deal with the idiots here on this channel. We block them. We just don't deal with that shit. But there's that small group. And again, because of the inroads they have in particular institutions here in the United States boxing community, they have a very loud microphone. They preach from a pulpit, and they have an audience, and they're able to profiteer off their nonsense. And it just sucks, because they ruin things a lot of times. Anyway, CJ Duncan with a super chat. Thank you so much, CJ. He says, Monster ducking Floyd, Manny, Ali, and Joe Louis. Exactly. Let's talk about this. So I wanted to bring up a statement from Steven Espinoza, of all people. I've heard this posed from a bunch of fans, but for Steven Espinoza to jump on, I can't say it's surprising. But he basically said, and several people, now the new narrative from the idiots, and I'm including Steven in that group, is, and to be clear, Steven isn't an idiot himself, but he appeals to the idiots. Okay. Um, they want to see Naoya Inoue move up to 135 and fight Gervonta Davis. That's the new thing now. They're so threatened by this guy. They're so afraid that they want him to jump another. And Espinosa's like, it's only 13 more pounds, right? This would be a 1, 2, 3 division jump from where he's at right now. Okay. To put things into perspective, for those who, just to give you a visual of what Steven Espinosa and certain fans and stuff are asking, they're wanting Inoue to move up 7 divisions from where he started. Okay. To put that into perspective, that would be like asking Gervonta Davis, who started his career at featherweight, to move all the way up to super middleweight and fight David Benavidez. Let me repeat this. Asking Naoya Inoue to fight Tank at lightweight is the equivalent in terms of the divisional jump of asking Gervonta Davis to fight David Benavidez at super middleweight. If you don't believe me, do the math yourself, okay? So picture Gervonta Davis in the ring against David Benavidez. Picture how that looks. Picture how asinine and insane that is, right? That's what they're asking Inoue to do after one fight at 122 pounds. That is the threat to the establishment that this man represents. And it's indicative of just a pattern that we've seen from a particular segment of the boxing community here in America, mostly in recent years. And other people have talked about this. I'm not the only one, but we saw Lomachenko get a lot of hate and continues to. And now he's seen it. Now he's called a privileged fighter because he fought for a world title in his second pro fight. That's the antithesis of privilege, by the way. Fighting 20 cans and then getting to fight for interim belts and regular belts on pay-per-view, no less, and earning 7 figures, fighting a BC level guy for a regular belt. That's privilege. Stepping up and taking on a huge challenge, taking on the number 1 guy in a division for a world title in your second pro, or not the number 1 guy. The number 1 guy was in his 3rd fight when he fought Gary Russell. But taking on that kind of challenge in your 2nd, 3rd pro fight, that is the antithesis of privilege. That's earning it the old school way. That's what most fans should want. But now Lomachenko is called a privileged fighter. Hilarious. And people say, well, he lost his 2 most important fights. Really? He lost the Gary Russell Jr. fight? He lost the Jorge Linares fight? Really? I thought he won those fights. To me, those fights are just as important as his fights against Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney. Actually, more important because he was closer to his prime in those fights. So now the narrative is that he lost his biggest fights. It's insane the way Lomachenko, just the double standards, right? And we saw this with Gennady Golovkin. We saw it with Sergey Kovalev. We saw it with Manny Pacquiao. There are other guys I could mention where we've just seen this pattern in recent years. And now it appears Naoya Inoue is the new guy. It appears he's going to be the new guy that they're going after. And the goalposts get shifted constantly. This week, I just saw tweets from certain people. I'm not even going to name this one dude because he's just running such a grift on his channel, and he really would love for me to call out his name here. He mentions me every 5 minutes, by the way. I don't know why. I haven't interacted with him in over a year once I figured out what he was doing. But he was saying things like Naoya Inoue is going to get destroyed against Fulton. He hasn't fought nobody, while also mentioning, I don't watch boxing below 135. But, you go on with all this stuff. And of course, he was proven to be wrong because he's a moron when it comes to boxing. And he's disappeared, just absolutely disappeared, right? And it's just indicative of like what all these guys do. Now, if Fulton had won, of course, these guys would be throwing a party right now on boxing Twitter and YouTube and all of it. Most of them have just disappeared because they were made to look so absolutely foolish because they clearly, look, it's one thing to predict Fulton would win because you know both guys and you just think Fulton would win. That's fine. I get predictions wrong all the time. We always do, right? That's part of it. But these guys revealed that they knew nothing about Inoue. And a lot of them didn't even know anything about Fulton. They were just looking at the two fighters physically, and because they're racist assholes, xenophobic assholes, pick one, they did a math equation in their head the way that academia and the media has taught them to do. And they said, well, Fulton's going to destroy this guy, right? These are the same dumb fucks that thought, oh my God, Wilder's going to flatten this bag of milk British guy in 2 rounds when he fought Fury. That's why they cherry picked him. And there are plenty of other examples I could give. So these guys were proven not just for being wrong with their prediction. They were proven to be completely ignorant about what they were talking about, right? That to me is the funny part. So I've been trolling hard on Twitter. I've been having fun this week, and I'm going to keep doing that. And look, the week isn't even half over. We still got a big one Saturday. And depending on what takes place Saturday, the internet might completely break. If Crawford's able to pull this off, and for the record, I think Crawford's going to win 7 rounds, 7 of 12 rounds. I don't know if he's going to get the decision, but in my opinion, he's going to win 7 of 12 rounds at least. If Crawford beats Spence in the eyes of most fans, regardless of how the decision goes, it's going to be a rough week for those idiots out there on certain YouTube channels and stuff, because every narrative they've been spinning for years now is going to be destroyed and blown up in 2 fights within 1 week. And that's going to be a tough pill for them to swallow. But I'm already seeing the goalpost shift. I'm already seeing, again, they're asking for Inoue to fight Gervonta Davis, which is hilarious. The stacking thing, there are still people that believe stacking is a thing. It's not. Go to the Association of Boxing Commission rules. You'll find no mention of it. People that talk about stacking don't even understand where the gauze and the tape go. The gauze and the tape don't go over your knuckles where the punch lands. They go over your hand. They go over your wrist. So most of these guys talking about that have never even had their hands wrapped. They've never fought before. They have no idea what they're talking about. And again, it's one thing to just have an opinion and your opinion's off. That's happened to me a million times. It's happened to all of us, right? You get predictions wrong and things like that. It's another thing to try to talk about something that you obviously are uneducated and ignorant about. And those are the people that really annoy me the most, because they're trying to talk like there's some wise person and they know what's going on more than anybody else. It's like, you clearly have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not going to sit here and try to preach to you guys about the right way to do brain surgery is the right way to build a rocket to fly to Mars is, because I don't fucking know. So I'm not going to even try to talk about it. I might be like, wow, that's cool. We could build a rocket and fly it to Mars. That's awesome. We could do brain surgery and save someone's life. Awesome. But I'm not going to pretend I know how to do it. That's what these guys are doing on social. It's just hilarious, man. Just hilarious. Another super chat from CJ. Thanks again, brother. He says, has any PBC fighter ever won a fight versus a fighter of the year post Floyd? The shadow moves that side of the street has done to fleece the public is amazing. Thank you for saying it, CJ, because if I say it, I get called all sorts of nasty things. You know how that shit works. But look, people have been posting on Twitter this week too. I think the record for like PBC versus top ranked guys is like 5-30 or something like that. That's pretty telling. Now, look, some of those matchups include like B-level guys, you know, not their absolute top-level guys. So maybe that statistic is somewhat misleading. But when you look at recent examples of the top guys going up against each other, PBC has struggled when they've gone to other promotions. I even think of like Jose Ramirez when he fought I can't think of his name right now. Why can't I think of his name? One of you guys in the chat will, but like it was just, he was obliterated. Another PBC guy that fought a top ranked guy. Like this stuff has happened several times. It's even when they fight maybe a matchroom guy or, you know, whoever. they kind of get exposed because when you're built in-house in these controlled situations, when you venture outside of that house, when you venture outside of that neighborhood, them streets can get pretty rough. And I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but there's a pattern. There's just a pattern there. And for the justification of the grift to continue, they have to find ways to discredit these other guys that are coming in now and doing great. I mean, for the record, and I've said this 1,000 times too, I love that boxing has representation across the globe. I think it's awesome. I think it's great we have fighters from Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America. We have Hispanic fighters that are of African descent. We have Hispanic fighters of European descent, Hispanic fighters of mestizo, indigenous descent, representing in the sport. We have Canadian fighters. We have fighters from Australia, South Africa, just like all over the place. I think that's awesome. I think that's cool. That's one of the cool things about this sport. And we've had that in the amateur system for a long time. Like if you go back and you look at the Olympics in the 30s and the 40s, there was representation from across the board. But in the pros, it's been mostly American, okay, for a while. And that dynamic has changed in recent years, and it's really starting to freak some people out. Some people are just really threatened by that, and I don't understand why. To me, my only explanation is, again, other than xenophobia and racism, which I don't even think a lot of these guys truly are racist. I think that they're insecure. They're insecure about themselves because they identify themselves with certain athletes, certain figures. And when they see those figures fail, they feel like they're failing because they're insecure. They have no self-worth. They don't have any value in who they are as a human being. So they place their value in these idols, Deontay Wilder, for example. So when those guys struggle, it's hard for these dudes. So they mask their insecurity in xenophobia, racism, whatever it is. I truly don't believe that. Some of them are hateful pieces of shit, but I really think most of them are just really insecure, didn't get enough hugs from daddy. Maybe they've never met daddy. And they're just displacing what's really going on in other ways, right? They're manifesting it in other ways. So, and that's just me playing psychologist right here. That's just what I've seen it so many times, guys. I see it every day. And what's also interesting is the people on that side and that segment of the boxing fan base. So I'm just going to close on this and then I'll bounce. Not just them, but their protectors at certain promotional outfits, certain networks, certain American boxing writer institutions. Their protectors in those institutions, those organizations, they are not above slinging out personal attacks against guys like me or whoever else that is willing to call out the bullshit. They don't even keep it to boxing. They take it to race. They take it to politics. They take it to nationality, whatever it is, and they engage in these personal attacks. It's this evil vitriol, right? It's not even related to boxing. These guys are just nasty pieces of shit that really make the sport hard to enjoy at times. We get to laugh at them. Like this past couple of days, the past 24 hours, we've been able to just kind of laugh at them and have fun at their expense, which they deserve, right? They set themselves up for it. But it's not the end. They're going to be back. There's going to be another one, and they're going to keep coming because they're protected, right? They're coddled. And so that's where we are. It's a state of affairs because, again, 95% of us are cool with everybody. And we just want to see the best fight the best. We want to see great fights. That's it. That's really it. And we'd like to see it at an affordable price where we're not being taken advantage of and ripped off. That's it. It's really not that complicated. Anyway, Naoya Inoue, pound for pound, #1 in the world right now. Probably still will be after Saturday night. Very, very likely still will be after Saturday night. We'll talk about all that, chop it up on TNC next Monday. Until then, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. Let me know if I was out of bounds on this video. Am I seeing too much into this stuff, or what? Or do you think I hit the note right on this? Let me know what you guys think, and we'll do it again Monday. All right, peace.